To another episode of Brown Girls Are Beautiful. I am your melanated queen and your hostess, Lil Foxy, aka Seven Wonder. Today we will be taking a look at and exploring the history of Operation Chaos. This was an article that was pointed out in the book Behold a Pale Horse by William Cooper. So with all that being said, if you have not caught my prior live stream, please take a look at that live stream. It was very powerful. It spoke about how they tried to counteract William Cooper in his attempts to come out with this book to expose the truth about the United States government. Okay, so let's get into this article. It is called Domestic Surveillance by Vern Leon. And you all, I just want to send this special phrase to you all. You have to go through it to get to it, okay? So unfortunately, if there's something that you wish to do in life, some of us have to go through a very tumultuous journey to get to where we want to be. So that is just a little quote by yours truly, CEO and founder of Brown Girls Are Beautiful. Shout out to everybody that has supported the brand. Shout out to all the melanated kings, warriors, beauty queens out there, and all of the princes and princesses that are continuing to walk in your divinity, okay? Now, it says, for over 15 years, the CIA, with assistance from numerous government agencies, conducted a massive, illegal domestic covert operation called Operation Chaos. It was one of the largest and most pervasive domestic surveillance programs in the history of this country. Throughout the duration of chaos, the CIA spied on thousands of U.S. citizens. The CIA went to great lengths to conceal this operation from the public, while every president from Eisenhower to Nixon exploited chaos for his own personal ends. One can trace the beginning of Operation Chaos to 1959. That was the baby boomer era, you all, when Eisenhower used the CIA to sound out the exiles who were fleeing Cuba after the triumph of Fidel Castro's revolution. Most were wealthy, educated, and professionals looking for a sympathetic ear in the United States. The CIA sought contacts in the exile community and began to recruit many of them for future use against Castro. The U.S.-based recruiting operation was arguably illegal, although Eisenhower forced the FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, to accept it as a legitimate CIA function. Congress and the public showed no interest in who was recruiting whom. All right, now J. Edgar Hoover, y'all, he was very evil, very conniving, and vicious, and we're going to look deeper into his history as well. The CIA's Office of Security was monitoring other groups at this time and had recruited agents within different immigrant organizations. The CIA considered this a normal extension of its authorized infiltration of descendant groups abroad, even though the activity was taking place within the U.S. Increased use of the CIA's contacts and agents among the Cuban exiles became commonplace until mass open recruitment of mercenaries for what was to be the ill-fated Bay of Pigs invasion was no longer a secret in southern Florida. It was no secret to Fidel Castro either, as we later found out. We're going to have to take a look at the Bay of Pigs invasion. Actually, I have a notepad. I want to write that down. Okay. Bay of Pigs invasion. Y'all, they are full of it. I didn't even know anything like this existed. I want to say money goes to me, money flows to me. Okay? That is an affirmation, a money affirmation, you all. Say your affirmations because money affirmations do work. This activity led the CIA to establish proprietary companies, fronts, and covers for its domestic operations. So widespread did they become that President Johnson allowed the then CIA Director John McCone to create in 1964 a new super secret branch called the Domestic Operations Division, DOD, the very title of which mocked the explicit intent of Congress to prohibit CIA operations inside the U.S. This disdain for Congress permeated the upper echelons of the CIA. Congress could not hinder or regulate something it did not know about, and neither the president nor the director of the CIA was about to tell them. Neither was J. Edgar Hoover, even though he was generally aware that the CIA was moving in on what was supposed to be exclusive FBI turf. So you see, they just did what they wanted to do anyway, okay? And J. Edgar Hoover, y'all, I'm writing his name down because we're going to get into him. All right, let's continue on here. In the classified document creating the DoD, the scope of its activities were to exercise centralized responsibility for the direction, support, and coordination of clandestine operational activities within the United States. One of those was burglarizing foreign diplomatic sites at the request of the National Security Agency, the NSA. The CIA also expanded the role of its quasi-legal domestic contact service, DCS, and an operation designed to brief and debrief selected American citizens who had traveled abroad in sensitive areas of intelligent interest. Because the interviews took place in airports, between the aircraft, and customs and immigration control, the operations were not technically considered domestic. The DCS also helped with travel control by monitoring the arrivals and departures of U.S. nationals and foreigners. In addition, the CIA reached out to former agents, officers, contacts, and friendships to help it run its many fronts, covers, and phony corporations. This old boy network provided the CIA with trusted people to carry out its illegal domestic activities, you all. All right. Now, it says the justification. With the DCS, the DoD, the old boy network, and the CIA Office of Security operating without congressional oversight of public knowledge, all that was needed to bring it together was a perceived threat to the national security and a presidential directive unleashing the dogs. So we saw this in 9/11. Okay, they said it was a threat to national security, which caused them to start checking you more thoroughly before you board a plane. How is it, okay, that they feel that a bottled water, a bottled drink is going to cause a plane crash or cause a bomb to be made on the plane? That makes no sense. The fact that you have to strip yourself down of any metals, the fact that you have to basically be frisked, okay, and scanned, and your rights almost basically violated right there in general public, all in the name of national security, you all. But we already know that the plane never did crash into those buildings like they said that it did, and we know that those buildings were detonated from underneath because these buildings were already designed back in the 1970s with detonation devices underground. And so this was predicted in The Simpsons that all of this would happen and that Trump would be nominated as president, you all. All of this stuff is orchestrated. And who's behind it? The CIA. Let's continue. So where was I? That happened in 1965 when President Johnson instructed McCone to provide an independent analysis of the growing problem of student protests against the war in Vietnam. Prior to this, Johnson had to rely on information provided by the FBI intelligence that he perceived to be slanted by Hoover's personal views, which often ignored the facts, because Hoover insisted that international communism was manipulating student protests. Johnson ordered the CIA to confirm or deny his allegations. All the pieces now came together. To achieve the intelligence being asked for by the president, the CIA's Office of National Security, Counterintelligence Division, and the newly created DoD turned to the old boy network for help. Many were old Office of Strategic Services people who had achieved positions of prominence in the business, labor, banking, and academic communities. In the academic arena, the CIA sought their own set of eyes and ears on many major college and university campuses. Okay, so these people were going to school with you all. The FBI was already actively collecting domestic intelligence in the same academic settings. The difference between the intelligence being gathered was like night and day. The FBI special agents and their informers were looking for information that would prove Hoover's theory. The CIA wanted to be more objective. In 1965, Johnson appointed Vice Admiral William Rayburn, CIA Director, DCI or Director of Central Intelligence, and Richard Helms, Deputy Director. Since Rayburn's days at the helm of the CIA seemed numbered from the outset, he never really became involved in the nuts and bolts of domestic operations. That was left to Helms, a career intelligence officer who had come up through the ranks. He had been Deputy Officer for Plans, DDP, since 1962 and Deputy DCI from 1956 to 66. And who could be trusted? Helms became DCI in June 1966. As Deputy Director, he had allowed the CIA slowly to expand its domestic intelligence operations, and understand his orders from President Johnson were to collect intelligence on college and university campuses with no governing guidelines other than don't get caught. Helms now had a free hand to implement Johnson's orders, and by August 1967, the illegal collection of domestic intelligence had become so large and widespread that he was forced to create a special operations group called the SOG. The SOG was embedded into the DDP's counterintelligence division and provided data on the U.S. peace movement to the Office of Current Intelligence on a regular basis. As campus anti-war protest activity spread across the nation, the CIA reacted by implementing two new domestic operations. The first was Project Resistance. Let's write this down, you all, because we're going to get into that as well. It was designed to provide security to CIA recruiters on college campuses. And also, we're going to dive into what it takes to become a CIA agent, okay? Because you can actually go online and see the criteria that you have to meet in order to become a CIA agent, you all. All right. And so it says, under this program, the CIA sought active cooperation from college administrators, campus security, and local police to help identify anti-war activists, political dissidents, and radicals. Eventually, information was provided to all government recruiters on college campuses and directly to super secret DOD on thousands of students and dozens of groups. The CIA's Office of Security also provided Project Merrimack. Y'all, they are on top of it. They just don't stop, okay? They are always finding ways to spy on people and come up with some nonsense. To provide warnings about demonstrations being carried out against CIA facilities or personnel in the Washington area. Project Merrimack, that's spelled MERRIMAC. Under both projects, the CIA infiltrated agents into domestic groups of all types and activities. It used its contacts, okay, with local police departments and their intelligence units to pick up its police skills and begin in earnest to pull off burglaries, illegal entries, use of explosive, criminal frame-ups, shared interrogations, and disinformation. CIA teams purchased sophisticated equipment for many starved police departments, and in return got to see arrest records, suspect lists, and intelligence reports. Many large police departments, in conjunction with the CIA, carried out illegal warrantless searches of private properties to provide intelligence for a report requested by President Johnson and later entitled Restless Youth. You all, this is a hot mess. The government, the presidents, this whole system is nothing except a bunch of criminals. SOG was being directed by Richard Ober, a CIA person with an established record of domestic intelligence operations in academia. When Ramparts magazine disclosed the relation between the National Student Association and the CIA in early 1967, Ober was assigned to investigate the magazine's staff members, their friends, and possible connections with foreign intelligence agencies. Okay? In July 1968, Helms decided to consolidate all CIA domestic intelligence operations under one program, and the title, the new operations was called Chaos, and Ober was in charge. Its activities greatly expanded from then on, at the urging not only of President Johnson, but also his main advisors, Dean Rusk and Walt Rostow. Both men were convinced that Hoover was right, and foreign intelligence agencies were involved in anti-war protests in the United States. Johnson was not convinced and wanted the CIA's intelligence in order to compare it with that provided by the FBI. Okay, then it gets into the Nixon administration, you all. After Richard Nixon took office in January 1969, Helms continued operations with the assurance that nothing would ever be leaked to the public. But he began to face pressure from two opposing factions within the CIA community. One wanted to expand domestic operations even more, while the other reminded him that Operation Chaos and similar activities were well over the line of illegality and outside the CIA's charter. To put a damper on this internal dissent, Helms ordered Ober to stop discussing these activities with his direct boss in counterintelligence, James Jesus Angleton. The internal protest continued, however, as White House aide and staunch anti-communist Tom Charles Houston pressed for ever-increasing domestic operations. Houston was eager to expand Operation Chaos to include overseas agents and to share intelligence with the FBI's Intelligence Division, directed by William Sullivan. There are more than 50 Chaos agents now, many receiving several weeks of assignment and training in overseas positions to establish their covers as radicals. Once they returned to the U.S. and enrolled in the colleges and universities, they had the proper credentials. So I want you to think back to allegedly President Obama, Obama, Barack Hussein Obama. His real name is Barry Soetoro. Do you recall that they did basically some history on him and stated that he was a radical, that he was one of those people protesting against the government? I want you to be very clear, okay, that these things were put into place back in the 60s. So they can orchestrate whatever they want, you all, and make it seem like these people went to college with you, okay? Now, let's continue on. In June 1970, Nixon met with Hoover, Helms, NSA Director Admiral Noel Gaylor, and Defense Intelligence Agency DIA Representative Lieutenant General Donald V. Bennett, and told them he wanted a coordinated and concentrated effort against domestic dissenters. To do that, he was creating the Interagency Committee on Intelligence, the ICI, chaired by Hoover. The first ICI report in late June recommended new efforts in black bag operations, wiretapping, and a mail opening program. Y'all, how many times have you got something in the mail and you saw that it had clearly been opened and they put it right in your mailbox? This is crazy. In late July 1970, Houston told the members of the ICI that their recommendations had been accepted by the White House. John Dean replaced Tom Houston as White House aide in charge of domestic intelligence, and at his urging, a Justice Department group, the Intelligence Evaluation Committee, was established to study domestic groups over Hoover's protests, deteriorating relations between the FBI and the other intelligence agencies, especially the CIA, caused Hoover to fire William Sullivan. At that time, Sullivan was the liaison officer between the FBI and the other intelligence agencies, and he strongly favored the expansion of domestic operations. Second thoughts, you all. Even Helms began to have second thoughts about how large chaos had grown, but Nixon made it clear to him that the CIA was a presidential tool he wanted at his disposal. Helms got the message, yet he also understood the growing uneasiness in other government circles. In 1972, the CIA's Inspector General wrote a report that expressed concern about Operation Chaos in the following way. We also encountered general concern over what happened, over what appeared to be a monitoring of the political views and activities of Americans not known to be or suspect of being involved in espionage stations. Then it goes into campus surveillance. The unleashing of the CIA and my concerns about the escalating war in Southeast Asia crossed paths on the Iowa State University campus in the fall of 1965. I do not know why I was chosen for recruitment or by whom. Only the CIA's old boy network on campus knows what criteria were used, what psychological profile was followed, and what future need of the CIA went into the initial selection process. There were no posters, no ads in local or campus newspapers, nor any notice in the college placement office. The CIA came, so they found who they wanted and placed them into position. The CIA came purporting to the representatives of legitimate business concerns that would normally conduct job interviews on campus. The only advance notice of the interview was a letter on what appeared to be real company letterhead saying that such and such company was interested in offering you a job. Only after accepting the interview and signing several documents stating you would never reveal anything about the exclusive job offer being made would the interviewers tell you whom they really represented. By then, you were trapped into eternal secrecy, even if you declined their offer. You could not even approach the university's administration or placement office to complain about the deception. For the student or faculty member who accepted the CIA's offer to spy, the payments offered were tailored to the individual. In some cases, it was only money. In others, it may have been a guaranteed draft deferment, research assistant grants, a future career with the CIA, patriotism, duty, or any combination. Short on money, plus wanting to serve my country without being sent to stop a bullet in a rice paddy halfway around the world, I listened intently to their pitch. I was hooked with an offer of an undeclared $300 in cash in an envelope each month, plus a guaranteed draft deferment and an offer of a bright future with the company. So basically they wouldn't draft him to go to war. In exchange, I was asked to do several things while admonished to maintain absolute secrecy about my intelligence gathering activities, the CIA, and any working relationship between us. I was persuaded to believe that the nation was facing a major crisis of the student unrest and ensuing protests, and that even though such activities were permitted in our free country, we should not allow foreigners and or communists to pull the strings if they were involved. Manipulation, you all. Mind games and psychological warfare being portrayed here. My campus missions included monitoring selected students, obtaining printed materials from student protest groups, including membership and donor lists and programs of planned actions and protests, gathering information on private sexual activities of selected students or faculty and on the student visa status of selected foreign students, and learning the identities of visiting traveling agitators from other colleges and universities. Ethnic and racial groups were watched as well as student radical movements. No guidelines were given that differentiated between what was a legitimate protest and what constituted a perceived threat to national security. This allowed the CIA to expand its domestic surveillance to cover draft-resistant organizations, military deserters, non-mainstream newspapers and publications, most black militant groups, okay? Now, I want you to make note of that because Operation Chaos played a major role with the Black Panther and Black Power movement, you all. So that is something else that I want to talk about here. Okay, so the black militant groups and U.S. citizens traveling abroad. Most domestic political activity was also covered if it showed any sign of differing from the American tradition. So just for you having a different viewpoint or a thought set or a thought pattern, you were basically targeted, and surveillance basically was, you were being monitored, okay, without your knowledge. So we're going to talk about the Black Panther and how that was infiltrated and how that was all orchestrated, and also the Black Power movement, you all. Okay, so sometimes what you thought you saw was not really what it was. My entire senior year found me caught up in this illegal domestic covert operation. It changed my personality, my political point of view, and my way of thinking about the structure and role of the different branches of our federal government. And it taught me to what lengths the government would go to hide illegal wrongdoings under the cloak of national security. We were asked to report on the whereabouts and activities of prominent persons whose comings and goings were not only in the public domain, but for whom allegations of subversion seemed sufficiently nebulous to raise renewed doubts as to the nature and legitimacy of the chaos program. Helms was being squeezed by White House demands to expand Operation Chaos and the fear that the whole question of domestic operations was going to become public knowledge. As Hoover feared, Helms found himself constantly shoring up one lie with another and then another. He found himself deceiving Congress and lying to the public as well as CIA employees. In March of 1971, a group of young CIA executives known as the Management Advisory Group, MAG, protested Operation Chaos and similar domestic operations by issuing a statement saying, MAG opposes any agency activity which could be construed as targeted against any person who enjoys the protection of the U.S. Constitution, whether or not he resides in the United States. Helms, of course, denied the CIA was involved in domestic operations or using basic American institutions such as the Peace Corps, the business community, or the media as covers for CIA operations. Just a few years later, Oswald Johnston of the Washington Star reported that over 35 American journalists, some full-time, some freelance, and some major media correspondents were on the CIA payroll. Anderson Cooper, Wolf Blitzer, Nancy Grace. It's a whole slew of them. People that you would not even imagine. They monopolized the media, you all. And in 1974, the CIA admitted that over 200 CIA agents were operating overseas posing as businessmen. All right. And so we're almost done here. I'm going to finish up this article and close out. The collapse of the House of Cards. The web of deception, misinformation, lies, and illegal domestic activities began to unravel with speed in the summer of 1972 when Howard Osborne, then chief of security for the CIA, informed Helms that two former CIA officers, E. Howard Hunt and James McCord, were involved in a burglary at the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. The House of Cards was about to come crashing down, and Helms now wanted to salvage what he could and distance himself from not only Watergate but also the domestic operations. He appointed CIA Executive Director William Colby to handle any investigations into the agency's domestic operations and begin to prepare for the inevitable. These people are always crooked. You can never trust them. Helms was called to Camp David by President Nixon and subsequently fired. His replacement was James Schlesinger, who would last but a few months. Schlesinger would be replaced in July 1973 by Colby, and Helms will become U.S. ambassador to Iran to get him as far away as possible. In an effort to damage control, Colby decided that Operation Chaos and Project Resistance should be terminated. In 1975, the CIA underwent public investigation and scrutiny by both the Church and Rockefeller committees. These investigations revealed considerable evidence showing that the CIA had carried out its activities with a tremendous disregard for the law, but both in the U.S. and abroad. During the life of Operation Chaos, the CIA had compiled personality files on over 13,000 individuals, including more than 7,000 U.S. citizens, as well as files on over 1,000 domestic groups. The CIA had shared information on more than 300,000 persons with different law enforcement agencies, including the DIA and FBI. It had spied on burglarized. All right, I don't know where we stopped, but the CIA, you all, had basically been keeping files on people that they shouldn't have been doing. The CIA had shared information on more than 300,000 people with different law enforcement agencies, including the DIA and FBI. It had spied on, burglarized, intimidated, misinformed, lied to, deceived, and carried out criminal acts against thousands of citizens of the United States. It had placed itself above the law, above the Constitution, and in contempt of international diplomacy and the United States Congress. It had violated its charter and had contributed either directly or indirectly to the resignation of a president of the United States. It had tainted itself beyond hope. This is crazy, you all. Of all this, the CIA's blatant contempt for the rights of individuals was the worst. This record of deceit and illegality implored Congress as well as the president to take extreme measures to control the agency's activities. However, except for a few cosmetic changes made for public consumption, such as the Congressional Intelligence Oversight Committee, nothing has been done to control the CIA. In fact, subsequent administrations have chosen to use the CIA for domestic operations as well. These renewed domestic operations began with Gerald Ford, were briefly limited by Jimmy Carter, and then extended dramatically by Ronald Reagan. Any hope of curbing these illegal activities is scant. Recently, George Bush and current DCI William Webster announced for the need to again target political enemies of the U.S. for assassination. Think about John F. Kennedy, you all, and how he was assassinated. It is ironic that Webster, a former federal judge, would choose to ignore the limits and constraints placed on the government by the Constitution. During his tenure as director of the FBI, the Bureau was once again involved in the infiltration of groups practicing their constitutional right to dissent against U.S. government policies. Once again, the FBI compiled thousands of files on individuals protesting Reagan's war against Nicaragua and support for the genocidal Salvadorian military. Now Webster is in a position of perhaps even greater power and without doubt would have no qualms about abusing it. In conclusion, given the power granted to the office of the presidency and the unaccountability of the intelligence agencies, widespread illegal domestic operations were certain. We as a people should remember history and not repeat it. It is therefore essential that the CIA be reorganized and stripped of its covert operations capability. Effective congressional oversight is also an important condition for ending the misuse of the intelligence apparatus that has plagued every U.S. administration since the formation of the CIA. A great deal is at risk, our personal freedom as well as the viability of this society. The CIA must be put in its place. Should we demand or allow anything less, we will remain vulnerable to these abuses and face the risk of decaying into a lawless state destined to self-destruction. Okay? That is it, you all. You can read this article. It's called Domestic Surveillance, The History of Operation Chaos by Vern Lyon. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. It's Lyon. And anyway, that is the history of the CIA, something that we are still dealing with today. It's not going anywhere. This government is crooked. This entire nation is just built on greed, built on lies and deception, you all. This, you all, has been an episode of Brown Girls Are Beautiful. I hope you have enjoyed the article that I've shared with you. And we'll dive deeper into this a little bit later. You all stay blessed and take care. And until next time, you all stay beautiful.